Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I am your host, Marcus Engel. This is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. Today, I am super excited to introduce to you my friend and a fellow narrative medicine person. Her name is Cindy Smalletz. Hi, Cindy. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Hi, Marcus.
And I even rocked my Columbia University shirt today to properly represent our connection.
Oh my gosh, I should have done that too.
So just before we started recording, you told me the story of what your last name means in Ukrainian, I believe. Correct?
Yes, it is Ukrainian for spreadable pork fat. And I learned this in my adult life by a pharmacist who was telling me how delicious my name was, and I had no idea. And it sent me on a journey from there.
Spreadable pork fat. That's great. That's
And it
great.
works in Poland too. And I gave a keynote lecture on narrative medicine in Poland once, and I started with, do you all know what my name means? And the whole room just started laughing.
That is priceless. That is priceless. So we could talk about a bunch of different things today. You know, we mentioned narrative medicine, and we got connected through the narrative medicine master's program at Columbia. So we've been known each other for what, nearly a decade, probably, right?
Yeah, at least.
Wow. And you have gone through some professional changes in the time that we have been acquainted. You're an occupational therapist. I want to get all of your bona fides in there. So you're an occupational therapist. You're a graduate of the narrative medicine program. Tell me the other professional things that you have done and are doing in titles.
Well, as they say, three masters don't equal a PhD, but I started out with a master's in instructional design and technology because I thought computers were going to ruin the world, but then I figured it would be better to figure out how to use them better because they can do a lot of good also. So that's what started my career way, way back. And then I came to Columbia. Yeah, then got the narrative medicine degree. Then I built an online program in narrative medicine. So I brought the first two together, but always being behind the scenes of working with clinicians and working with students that would be clinicians. I'm like, I just need to be a clinician. I need to get on the other side just to fully round out what I can speak to with my narrative medicine world and who I can teach and who I can reach. So then I went back and just finished occupational therapy school during the pandemic. So that's the new one.
That's the new one. That's the new one. And so people, I think non-clinicians like myself, may not fully understand what occupational therapy is. So could you give us just like the layman's point of view, what occupational therapy is?
I feel like this one is just as difficult to define as narrative medicine, but it's basically helping people either find restore what it takes to find meaning in their lives, and that could be physical, that could be mental, it could be adaptation, it could be restoring, it could be function, it could be activities, it could be kind of the ability to do in life what is meaningful to them. And part of what drew me to the field was it's so important. I mean, all of the clinical fields are, but occupational therapy is really geared around the patient stories and the patient's goals as they come first. And it's not doesn't always fit the medical model. So it's about really figuring out what someone needs the most for themselves. So, and we get trained in half mental health, half physical health. So a combination of the both.
That's excellent, and I'm the recipient of OT from way back in the day, which even started out with just someone handing me objects to try to identify by tactile feel. And I think at the time there may have been a little more focus on the physical rather than the mental. And I love that you've got so much training in the mental health aspect too, especially in the wake of the pandemic. We all know that that's something that's suffering in our society.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely. And even in the physical setting, it's the mental health that helps reach the patient and figure out how to kind of inspire the patient to want to even do these activities. So it's kind of present everywhere, even it's just less obvious.
So you mentioned inspiring the patients to want to be better. What inspired you to go down this healthcare road, if I can ask? And I also ask this question because it's the initial writing assignment that I give to my pre-meds at Notre Dame, and that is their first paper of the semester is to write about a time that they were there for someone else or someone was there for them. And I start them into that world of narrative medicine based on the story of I'm here and the presence that I felt. Can you share a little bit about what has inspired you to go into this work and maybe that story of compassion for you as well?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I grew up, my brother's a neurosurgeon, my mom was a nurse. So I grew up in this realm. But for some reason, I went the other direction at first. I went into corporate America and education and computer programming, and I just wanted to make a lot of money. And then at somewhere, I guess as you age, you start to realize values change a little bit. Like, no, I'm not finding meaning in what I do, and there's too many decades left to work. So how can I find meaning? So, oh my God, it's too late to go to school. Let me just work at Columbia at the medical center. This will be close enough. I will do technology. And I did that. And then the narrative medicine just kind of walked in the door one day. And I just opened my mind to this other world of kind of compassion, presence, and the value of it. And the fact that it is a thing that has a name, that has a training for, that exists. And I had personal experience with my own clinicians, the really good ones, who listened to me and cared for me, and just sensing and feeling through the work we do the value of that just inspired me. And then I started teaching occupational therapy students narrative medicine and seeing how much they all cared about the person. Just I was like, something was like tipping, 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 and then I got this award from the OT school as friend of the OT program, and I sat in the graduation, and I was like, I was incredibly moved by everything that happened. I'm like, well, okay, maybe. And then I had this personal experience with someone who I'm going to call Alex for the purpose of public podcast. But Alex and I had grown apart and pretty much were not in each other's lives. And then I knew something happened to Alex. She lost a lot, her marriage, her job, and things were not well. So I tried to call, and the voicemail was full. And I just like, I don't know what got me to do it, but I drove down, and I just showed up at the door and couldn't get in the door. Had to get the police, get in the door. And here I was in the doorway, reuniting, the most awkward and powerful reuniting with somebody who I hadn't talked to in a really long time, who was suffering from alcoholism and addiction. And here I am with four police officers. Hi,
Wow.
nice to see you again. And she let me in. And I spent the whole night, and we sat there, and I, I, I didn't know how to be there for her, but I asked her, and she told me everything, her fears, her losses, her struggles, gave me resources to read. I mean, it was incredible. And this started an entire journey that it's still going on, but very much in the first year with ups and downs when I went to AA meetings with her and relapses. And I just really became part of this circle. We called it we had a few of us in this circle of support. And I tried to bring my presence. I don't know if my presence at that moment was just fortuitous or lucky, but it's really her that healed. But she let me in. So the presence went both ways. And I was like, someone actually trusted me in this situation. So I learned so much about addiction and mental health. And then I went to occupational therapy school with a completely different mindset of why I needed this work. I needed this work. And that's like literally the next year I went to occupational therapy school.
Wow.
And
And so that was after you knew the world of narrative medicine. Yeah.
yes, I think I was more open to open to the experience, but also I had tools in which to process the experience. Where I think if it happened a decade before, I don't even know if I would have been at the door. And I certainly would have not known not that I knew what to do when I was at the door when it happened. However, I knew enough to persist to try to figure out what that meant for me. I mean, I had my own mental health to work through. I saw an addiction counselor because I didn't know how to support somebody in that situation. So I feel like we each, I was open to learning, to asking, to admitting that I didn't know. Like, I'm here and I want to help. I know how to help you. Like, tell me how I can help you. And that was very powerful to me.
Yeah, but it's that openness and intentionality to help that's what we feel, right? We feel that compassion and presence. I feel like, to me, what you just described is active listening, right? You're opening yourself up and asking the question, how do I help? Because I've not been in this situation before, right? We've all had to ask ourselves these
Yeah.
questions. And I always say I had to ask a lot of blind people a lot of questions before I would know how to help myself even. And so just opening
Right.
ourselves to the pain and suffering of another, I feel like that's something that I really learned a lot through narrative medicine, even though I experienced that and had people, how do I say, model it for me. I learned such deeper ways of being with and listening and empathy through narrative medicine. So I know we talked a little bit about OT and how it relates to mental health, and I feel like there is a common thread that runs through that to narrative medicine. I don't know if I do a great job explaining to people what narrative medicine is. Can you give me your definition, and we can compare notes, because this seems like it's an ongoing conversation in the narrative medicine ecosystem, right?
Yes. And what is it, 13, 14 years
We're
later, we're
still
still
having this
having this
conversation, but
conversation.
maybe that's part of it.
And I have my students continue this conversation because it is partly personal. There is a formal definition in many forms. One version is narrative medicine fortifies clinical practice with the narrative competence to recognize, absorb, metabolize, interpret, and be moved to action by the stories of illness. And we also use a Matrix quote, which I'm going to get wrong now. Something like, nobody can tell you what narrative medicine is. You have to experience it yourself. And we try to use that as it's not, it's a thing that exists. It's a formal practice, but it gets interpreted by those who do it in a unique way. And I think I also often describe it, this is not necessarily everybody's definition, but as a tool to get to a goal. So the goal might be better connection, community building, recognizing the self. But the narrative medicine is a process to get to that goal instead of narrative medicine being the goal.
And
So that's my latest.
thank you for that. And we often talk about in narrative medicine that it's descriptive, not prescriptive, right?
Oh, those are good words. I never thought
Oh,
of it that way.
if you're not familiar with that, then I just made it up, and it's completely my idea, and it might not
Yeah,
even be
you own
endorsed
that.
by narrative medicine. But that's kind of how I think of it too. Is what we do. We can describe what we do, but we can't prescribe what we do. If that makes any amount of sense.
Yes. All it does is like set the foundation to then be able to do what you need to do. Like, it's not the doing, pre it's the preparing for the doing almost. It's like very hard to define because it is very hard to define. It's not how they teach in school active listening. Oh, nod your head, repeat back. Those are basic skills too, and they have a place. However, this goes so deeper, and I think it just helps teach how to be more curious and how to use that curiosity. It's almost it's how to be open to surprise, open to unknown, start to feel comfortable in the uncomfortable. Things that are really hard to exactly define until you're in that moment.
Yeah. One of the definitions that I say is it's kind of a weird working definition, but I say those of us in narrative medicine, we take the stories of healthcare and we turn those stories into something we can learn from. And
Yes,
that's
yes. We did a survey once on what's in common with everybody who comes to narrative medicine, and it was to change the world. And I think that's the doing something. Like it's taking the stories and whatever that is, it's the doing
yeah.
part.
Everybody wants to change the world and to heal
Yeah.
ourselves too, right? Because I feel like that is a significant part of what draws many of us to this work. Is we're going to use this work and narrative to deal with some of our own traumas. It certainly was for me, at least.
Yes. Everybody has a personal reason, and not everyone knows it coming to the program. I didn't know it. I realized it 2.5 classes in. I remember sitting there one day. I did a writing prompt and I put my pen down. I'm like, I think I get why this works. And I remember the whole class looked at me like, it's about time. I'm like, I didn't know what I was looking
Yeah,
for until I found it. It was so interesting. And this story is very common. Either people know what they're looking for and come to find it, or they don't even know why they're there, but something's drawing them there. And then hopefully they find it.
it's this is such a blue collar way of thinking about it. But when I came to narrative medicine, I often think about it from the Wayne's World perspective, where they see the guitar in the window and it's all hail, and it's like this is it, right? When I first heard about narrative medicine,
Yeah.
it's like, wait, it's storytelling with a purpose that helps those who end up treating patients just like me. If I want to change the world, as you said,
Mhm.
I've got to help people by listening to their stories so they can be more present, right? Our stories often, the stories that run around our heads as we talk about in mental health, right? The ruminating stories, some of those get worked out through the work of narrative.
Yes. And we often say, when you write to a prompt, it's like sometimes you're surprised at what comes out. Stories you don't even consciously know are ruminating in your head may come out on the page. And it's amazing. How else? It's hard to just sit down there and talk about what's been ruminating for the last 20 years in someone's head. But through this indirect creative means, it might come out. And then it's a thing. Then it's on the page. Then it can be talked about, listened to, absorbed, um, witnessed by others. It becomes something.
So where do you see the benefits of narrative? It's therapeutic, right? It's therapeutic, but it's not necessarily therapy. And that's where I want to help people who are certainly in this world of healthcare caught up in a systemic almost injustice of trying to care. How do we help sort out those stories, and how are you doing it now? Where's the work taking you now?
Good question. We are cooking up some ideas at Columbia to start integrating. So it's not final yet, but we're working with the rehab department and the palliative care service. And I really, really, really want to see where OT and narrative medicine can go on the palliative care service. So I'm hoping we'll see. But right now, I mean, I just finished school, so during the pandemic, and I'm busy running my program in the meantime, and I'm trying to find the right way to bring the fields together because that was my whole goal of going here. But during my clinic work, it was a, pro, a profound experience having the narrative medicine before learning the clinic work, and the difference came out in all of my clinic assignments in a different way, and I didn't always know until a supervisor would mention something to me. I'm like, oh, you heard or you noticed something unsaid. Like I actually had a clinic summer I spent working in two homeless shelters, and one specifically was an addiction clinic, and I would notice when things weren't said, and those became red flags. And my supervisors listened to me. So all of a sudden, my weird hunches started to have value. And I really tried to find words, and I'm still finding words. I think I want to actually research what this can do and how this changes clinical perspectives going in. But it does change the way in which I would listen. And changes what I would notice. And instead of just the words said, I spend extra time on the unsaid and the setting and all those other things. Sometimes missing the words, which was where I need to practice. But there was one, I was working at a skilled nursing facility during COVID, and one patient in particular actually just like took me aside and said, I wrote a poem and I want to read it to you. And
Oh,
now, why did that happen? Like this
yeah.
moment was, I will never forget it as one of probably the most meaningful moments in the last couple of decades of my life. And I don't know why. I don't know what I did. We weren't talking about work. We weren't writing together. We weren't, I mean, that's not billable. So I had to, I was a student, so I'm following the rules to the best that I can. And something changed the way that we interacted. And I think and I know that goes back to the narrative medicine. It's not just because, I was friendly, because a lot of people there were friendly, but I was seeking those moments, and those moments would give back to me. And I've worked whole days, I'd have a migraine the whole day, and then I would just spend a minute caring for someone and just listening to them, and the whole
Mm.
migraine would go away. Like my whole body was telling me something. So I tried to put together this presentation at the end on compassion and empathy, and I'm using that right now, and I don't know if that's the right words, but whereas empathy could be scary because you're maybe feeling someone's pain too much, but compassion, there's ways to witness their pain without having to feel it necessarily, but you can still really take that time to connect, and that actually helps the care provider. That gives back. That's the reflection. That why we're in this work, and it's okay to care, and it's I see the system working every possible way against that. Like, has to be billable, you have to hurry up, you have to do, you only have this many minutes and you have to accomplish X, Y, and Z. But if you take, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute, connect in a different way on this whatever this is, it could change. I mean, the patients would do whatever I would ask after that moment. Like, they would, even though as a student, it would change like compliance. It would change. I just feeling good about the work, but it would
Yeah,
change
there you
me.
go. Yeah, yeah,
So it
right.
only helps both.
It's a both ways. It's a both ways thing. It's a both. It's
Yeah.
not a one way street. It's both. And I feel like so often when clinicians describe burnout and compassion fatigue, they are there's almost a I'm going to turn the other cheek away from it, right? When we lean in
Yeah.
and we open ourselves to the compassion and the vulnerability of others, it ends up helping us, right? It's counterintuitive, but that's the
Yeah.
way it works best. We don't.
Yes, it's like a
Oh,
mirror.
beautiful example, beautiful example.
I tell people it's just like a mirror. You give out, you get back. Like, it goes
Wow.
both ways. And it's amazing. It's amazing to feel that, being on the like stressed out clinician side, that difference. And I want to research it and find more language for it, because right now it's like, a lot of people, have these, and especially in narrative medicine, we get really excited about these concepts because once we feel them, we're like, this is great. But how do we continue to justify this to the world? So that is my
Excellent.
mission
Well,
right now. So
my co-instructor at Notre Dame, Dr. Dominic Vachon, published a book, I believe, last year called "How Doctors Feel" or "How Doctors Care." I think "How Doctors Care" is the title. Sorry, and so
oh,
he's done so much of the work on compassion and compassion science. It's a really great
mm,
thing, for the I believe it's a mere 600 plus pages, so it takes some time, but this is where I feel like we are able to
oh,
quantify some of these things. We are able to quantify these moments. We just have to first recognize them, and I feel like that's a narrative medicine concept too. Is the recognition? It's the attunement, I suppose, to others and the suffering of others that gives us a basis for how we form the stories of the relationship, right?
yeah, exactly. And during this time, the last clinic assignment was probably the most burnt out I had been, like 12 hours a day, early COVID. commuting, also working full time, running my narrative medicine program, also running this narrative medicine group on 10 p.m. on Wednesdays, which we still run with clinicians and folks on the island of Haida in Canada, which I remember thinking, like, how do I have time to do this? And I'm so grateful for that group because I did have that hour every week just for myself to write, to process this. And I do think that had a role also, taking that time, even when I was tired, exhausted, and not sleeping, and it was really late at night. The value was much stronger than losing that hour. So I think that helped me during this time process, even start to, I mean, it's so blurry because it moves so fast, but just begin to find words and notice that something's happening here and I don't know what it is, but I'm going to be open to it. And I think the openness came from the narrative medicine. And that was only 12 weeks. So I just, but I want more of this. But in 12 weeks, I'm like,
Doing
this is
something.
doing something. I could see, yeah, I mean, the amount of burnt out was like palpable everywhere. And yet I was able to pull myself out of that for little bits to just find language for it, find language for whether it's myself I'm writing about, the situation, something completely different, whatever it is, it's like in that moment what I needed for me, which helped
Yeah,
then give
and
back.
the concepts of narrative medicine and doing it, you can use it for yourself again, right? When we hit these,
Yeah.
I knew about it anecdotally from writing memoirs, but then whenever I got into the formal practice and I saw, oh wow, there actually is real hard, solid research behind why this is so therapeutic and valuable. I almost think of it, I'm not super knowledgeable about this subject, but like energy practitioners, Reiki practitioners, they talk about how you should, to make yourself a good practitioner, you have to practice on yourself every day. And I feel that same way about narrative, that oftentimes I need to sit down for a while every day and put something out of a feeling, a situation, and through the writing, much is revealed about myself, which helps me in the next phase, whatever my thinking is. It slows us enough to maybe make that openness a little easier to attain.
Yeah. And it's that acknowledging and honoring those thoughts of that time. And you'll never have that time again. You'll never have that thought at that time again. So honoring it is so important to capture. And the times I haven't written about my experiences, I'm like greatly regretting because now I'm trying to find the language and go back, and it's not going to be like that. I will never feel exactly that again, and it's too late now. So,
Yeah, while it's
capturing it in
fresh,
the moment.
right?
And you don't have to be a writer, and that's why I'm not a writer. I'm not. I don't even know how they let me in the program. I'm just not a writer, and I'm still not a writer, and I will probably never be a writer, and that's okay. It's the writing that does the work. It's not don't and I tell everyone interested in the field that it's not about being a writer. It has a lot of right. It's very important to have writers, but to practice it is anyone,
Yeah,
everyone,
yeah. Not even specific to clinicians, just everyone.
right?
We can all gain a lot
Everyone.
by simple reflection.
Yeah, because to be present for another person and to be present for yourself is something
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
needs and can do. And if nothing else, being present for yourself comes out of
yeah.
the work. And then that, of course, eventually reflects off of others and in life, clinical
Yeah,
or not.
it's humanity. I feel it. I feel like,
Yeah,
we
I
could
know.
talk about
Imagine
this
that.
for hours and philosophize over what is, but really it just gets down to being human. Just gets down to being human, being
Yeah.
in a moment with another human being. Yeah,
Yeah. And this helps clarity for that. I always thought I was a nice, good human being before. No, it's not about that. It's like it's about finding ways and to make the bring that fuel that energy to the mirror to get to the other person. And I'm very careful about that too, because it's not saying we're not everyone is human. We're all humans. How can you highlight that humanity and bring that
Especially
out?
in systems where it's so difficult to do, which we can go back around on that. But hey, I want to be so mindful of your time,
Yeah.
and I have a couple of random kind of rapid fire questions to shoot past you to finish up today. How's that sound?
Okay.
Okay, so my first question
Sure.
is, let's say you are stranded on the proverbial desert island, but yet you get to have one piece of art with you, whether that is a novel or a film or an album, or I don't know if you can bring a Broadway play to a desert island, but wh-
Well, if it's already
yeah.
proverbial, I
Good
think you can.
point. Do you have a certain piece of art that
Mm.
speaks to you?
My God, I have so many, but of course, I just have to go with the rapid fire. For some reason, the first thing that came to mind is any of
Mm.
Louise Penny's books. Because when I'm feeling down, I read a Louise Penny book, and I have two that I'm saving. I'm afraid to touch because I'm waiting for like me to feel my worst, so I can get the
Priam,
most value
I'm
out of
going to
these books.
save these
I
these pieces of literature for my time to grieve. Wow. Okay.
yeah, they're just waiting there. But also, I wouldn't mind bringing "Come From Away" because I think that would be a great thing to take on a proverbial desert
There you
island if I
go.
can take
Sure
the whole
thing. Sure
Broadway play.
thing. Oh, fine, fine. So, second question for you then is if you opened up your purse, your wallet, your PayPal account, and you found that $100 had magically appeared in there, and you have to spend that money on yourself today, what would you buy?
Oh my God. I was
Okay,
going to
that's
say
good.
running
That's
clothes
great.
or
That's great.
food.
Running's a big passion.
the, that was the not, yeah, it's my sanity finder. Of course, if there's 23 more hours to debate this, I will hopefully come up with something slightly more valuable, like maybe putting it towards my mortgage or my credit card debt.
I like the running clothes
However,
option.
if I
That's
needed,
much more.
yeah, if I needed immediate joy,
There's
that or
something
something
soft. That's
soft.
great.
I'm
Nice,
simple.
nice. So my final question for you is, let's say you have the world's largest billboard on top of the highest mountain. What is the message that you broadcast to humanity?
Oh, how much
Yeah,
space on this
that's the
billboard?
problem, right?
I'm toss up between keep breathing, because that's a phrase I always say, and or love yourself. That could be taken the wrong way. So I probably want to reword that. 'Cause I think there's a lot of selfishness out there, but I think there's more really good people that don't have enough compassion towards themselves. And how can you, but you can't tell somebody to relax or have compassion because it does, then it has a negative effect. So I need to put it in a more positive light.
Just this morning I started reading Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And in there, she talks
Oh,
about
ooh.
the Dalai Lama being being informed that people in the West have self hatred, and him not like even hardly
Mm.
comprehending this idea. How can you be compassionate to other people if you are not compassionate to yourself? And so I
Oh my
just, it
God.
was exactly what I thought of whenever you talk about love yourself. Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah, love yourself, have compassion. Or or I'd put my third option is
Mm,
you are good enough. Because that seems to be an important phrase, especially lately. What is it, is
goodness.
it good enough? It is good enough. That
Yeah,
doesn't have to be the best.
yeah. All
It's good
good
enough.
stuff
It's okay. It is like
with
this to
all
be
of our
human.
flaws and failings, and thank you again for sharing some of our areas that were open to our own flaws and failings. And I feel like I've done that through narrative medicine, and I just have learned so much today from our conversation, not just about narrative and your work, but it gets my brain thinking in different ways about how to really put more. How do we do it in not just at the bedside in the clinic, but in our daily life too, right? How can I do this more?
Yeah.
And I fail quite frequently, but good enough is good enough apparently. So
Yeah, as do I, which is why I feel okay teaching narrative medicine to others because I am not the perfect example of narrative medicine. And here I am. I believe in it and it's made a difference. And I don't have to be doing it all the time and perfect, although better is better. But I know reality and it's about finding a balance and always trying to find the balance. Um, so thank you. You have been an inspiration to me since I have met you
well,
probably over a decade
thank you, and
ago. So it's so great to have this conversation again.
and Cindy, thank you again for your time today, for your knowledge, your wisdom, and for helping spark some new ideas in my brain. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with the Compassion and Courage community.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for our reconnection, and thank you for everything you are doing. So,
I
I,
appreciate it.
I'm so glad to reconnect again. I'm
I
grateful.
am too. I am too. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm Marcus Engel. I am your host, and this is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. Thank you all for engaging with social media, and we appreciate your time. Thank you for doing what you do.